Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
Welcome back to Stories from the River. I'm here with my former business partner and our very special guest, our co-founder, former president and CEO, Jonathan Ishee. Jonathan, welcome to the pod. We finally got you here.
Well, thanks, Charlie. Appreciate the invitation. And I'm a little shy and don't love to talk too much. So I'm doing you a favor here. But no, just kidding. I'm honored to be here. I've been watching some of these, and you're doing great, and they're really fascinating and entertaining. I'm enjoying watching these from a distance. So
yeah, well, listen. You've been one of the most requested guests, and I get asked all the time, "What's Jonathan up to? What's Jonathan doing?" And I said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to just get Jonathan on here and tell your story. It's a special story. You know, we're sitting here recording this on May 8th, 2023, which is 1 week before the 20-year opening 20 years ago, May 15th, 2003, the day you and Jackson opened the doors of Pineville, the very first store. So how does that feel?
yeah, I mean, it feels amazing. I mean, it feels great that, what started as an idea and, arguably not a great idea, but an idea, and a lot of work has grown into something, much bigger than what we could have imagined, and has, helped a lot of people and provide a lot of careers for a lot of people. So it's amazing to think about, that 20 years ago, I remember the day really well. I remember kind of the situation. Jackson and I had left grad school a little early, and our buddies were calling us from graduation. We were opening on graduation weekend, and they were like, "What are you doing? Where are you? Why are you not here?" And so we had to get to work that day. So it was a good trade-off, though.
Great trade-off. It's worked out. Well, I want to get into that. Before we do, just how are you doing today? How's your family? What's going on right now in your world?
Yeah. Family is amazing. And I've been married, 14 years now. And,
Congratulations.
just amazing woman. I'm really lucky. She's focusing, a lot of her time and energy around nutrition as it relates to education, and especially in underprivileged schools. And so she spent a lot of time doing schoolwork, and really proud of what she's doing. And that's her passion, and she's making a difference. So it's cool to see. My son, we were just talking earlier, son Max is really into basketball and golf. He's 12, having a little bit of success, which may be surprising, to people who've seen me play basketball, but he's a good little player, and it's been really fun to watch. And then my daughter Sims is 10, and she's kind of the comedian of the family, keeps everybody laughing and talking, and just super active all the time. She threw, unbeknownst to Ann and I, threw a big Cinco de Mayo party for us. We weren't expecting it. Had a whole routine, and it was really great. So yeah, I mean, it just couldn't be better at home. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Well, that's awesome. Well, if they get surprised by Max, they only need to look at his mother, and they know where the athleticism
That's
comes.
very true. Yeah.
But you do have some athletic genes in your DNA, and you've been. I know you're an avid golfer, and you got some basketball genetics here, so it's not far from the tree there. So, listen, you had the original idea for Broad River Retail way back when you were still in grad school. So I want to get into that a little bit. And I guess we were just talking about, 20-year anniversary. So 20 years ago, you were probably running all those fire drills, before with construction, inspection, hiring, staffing, getting the internet and the phone line set up, getting the fire alarms passed and set up, getting tagging done, the software, the bank accounts, the merchandising, the receiving, and just trying to get everything figured out for something you've never done before, for the opening of store number 1. And so, I know you say you remember the day, but in some ways, I'm sure it was like a blur. And in a 24/7 high stress situation, we were talking off camera, you're like, yeah, I don't have any stress right now. I'm good. But I don't think that was always the case. And I know it was very stressful at times running the business. But I'm sure it was a lot of fun at the same time. So we'll get into all that. But first, I want to go back and just dig in a little bit further into your story, your unique story, because after all, it is Stories from the River. So Jonathan, your background, tell us about your background. Where'd you grow up? How did your upbringing impact you as a businessman and as a family man? I saw your face light up when you're talking about your family. So can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in a small town in Mississippi, as you know, and my mom was a school teacher and really focused on education and reading, and passed the love of reading down to me. And my dad, really sharp business person, kind of street smart, and really thoughtful, and did a good job of always thinking about other people first. So I learned a lot from them, and then. And then my granddad had a clothing store, we've got a little retail in our blood. And my granddad had a clothing store. He fought in World War II, and right after the war came back and opened a clothing store in Okolona, Mississippi, which is a tiny little town. And he ran that thing for 50 plus years. And so I got to work with him, and even my uncle had a clothing store in our town. So, so anyway, just a lot of retail kind of experience, just seeped in over the years, and but just wonderful way to grow up, in a really good place with good people. Had great parents that instilled a work ethic, and I think a desire to be excellent, and to not just do good enough. So hopefully that translated, a little bit into the company over the years, but that would have been, something that my parents would have taught me all along the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Make a 99, and Dad would say, "What'd you miss?"
Yeah.
Why didn't you make 100?
That's right. That's right. Can always get a little bit better because they had high standards and high expectations for you. It's interesting that we both had that retail background in our families. My family had Miskelly Furniture, some of my dad's cousins, and then as my dad recently passed away earlier this year, and then we were going back through our family history, and his dad, who passed away when he was 16, had a retail store, a merchant store. And so I was just kind of reminded of that. And I never, I always say that before you wrote me into retail and I found purpose and passion in retail, I hated shopping growing up. I wanted to be outside doing sports and just playing outside. And I thought maybe sports and business would be the perfect combination. And here I am. And I think that's, it's interesting the way that kind of things coalesce. And I like to say that God's got a sense of humor, and his sense of humor is that I found purpose and passion in retail. So retail can be a lot of fun. And I'm glad you got those learnings from your parents, and that's awesome. Did you have a couple of defining crucible moments from your childhood or from college that really stand out in terms of refining who you are today, including your resiliency, your identity, and your character?
I have to talk about my granddad, in a little bit of this, and he ran the store, Howard's department store that we talked about, and one of the things early on, he was retiring, and I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and so I was staying with him during when he was retiring, running his going out of business sale, retirement sale, and I remember very clearly the last day he and I were going to open the door, and he put his key in the door and he said, "Jonathan, I think you should find a way to turn your own key." And I said, "What do you mean, Granddad?" And he said, "Turn your own key in life, and make sure that you're doing something that you're passionate about." He said, "I've never once turned this key and not been passionate about it, and not been excited to see what the day held." And just that that mentality and thought process around, taking some control of your life, and those things really stuck with me. And I've thought about that often. I've told the story often. I think, as I was trying to beg my way into graduate school, that was one of the stories I told that maybe connected. And, they were asked, "What's your goal?" And I said, "Well, I can't tell you specifically, but someday I want to turn my own key." And so I think, that was really important in my, business career. I think, in school and college, I kind of had, I think, probably a pretty similar up and down journey to a lot of people. I went in with a lot of expectation and excitement, and not a lot of work ethic, and that doesn't work well. And so I learned the hard way that I had to get focused. And after the summer of my freshman year, my dad put me out on working on a gas rig, drilling gas wells in like rural Alabama in the middle of the summer. And I'm not sure I ever made a B after that. Like, I mean, I was like, all right, I got it. This is the alternative. I've got a great opportunity in front of me. And so that was a good learning that, that was tough work.
That was in freshman, sophomore year of college.
That's right.
And you had to switch schools at that time, right? So
Yeah.
there's a crucible moment in all of that.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
kind of maybe had a reset, got you serious about, okay, we'll do this the right way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's tough work.
Yeah, it was.
And I've heard the story, turning your own key. I don't think I've heard you say it just like that. That's a really great quote. Make sure you always have passion about turning your key. And there was never a day he wasn't excited about what the day might hold. Now, your granddad is a very lived an awesome life. Howard Miskelly, a war veteran, and there's a statue of him, right?
Yeah.
And so I know you had so many great learnings from Howard in the life that he lived. Can you just riff on Howard just for a second?
As it relates to this company, I moved to Charlotte, and Jackson. I'm sure we'll get into Jackson, and you can't talk about this company and not spend a lot of time talking about Jackson and my co-founder of the business. But I moved here, and he was the only person I knew in Charlotte, really. And so this, we didn't really have a lot of personal relationships, and the business was hard, and almost every day, I would call. If not every day, I'd call my granddad and we would talk. He'd say, what happened today? How'd it go today? And just, to be able for him to have the time to spend sometimes an hour plus on the phone on a Tuesday night, hearing me lament about whatever little problem we had, and to have his experience and wisdom, was incredibly important. And I meant to bring it, I've still got it in my office. He came up for our opening, and we printed up some business cards. We had his name, and for title, we've said The Godfather. So he loved that.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were calling him during those early days and getting advice from Howard on a regular basis.
Yeah, I don't think I had cable, so I didn't have anything to do at night,
Keeping the cost expenses low, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you get the idea for a furniture store? Now, your family has been in the retail furniture business since the late 70s in central Mississippi with Miskelly Furniture, which is a really well-known company now and very well respected, has the dominant market share in central Mississippi and is growing with the next generation. What was your knowledge of that business growing up? And what was your experience with Miskelly Furniture when you were growing up and then going to college? So let's just start there.
Well, it opened the year I was born.
Wow.
It opened and so I can always track their anniversaries.
Okay.
But it opened in 1978, and so it was kind of always there as, and it was started as a small furniture store in Jackson, and as so often happens, and as we'll talk about, things that seem like tragedies or real challenges really become opportunities. And so, unfortunately, I think it was the early 80s, the Pearl River flooded, and really was a terrible situation in Jackson, and created a need for a lot of furniture, and a lot of the existing furniture stores were in the floodplain.
Wow.
And so they were one of the people that survived, and they built on that momentum to turn into the kind of juggernaut company that they are today. And we'll get into it later, but there are times we didn't have a literal flood, but we certainly had some figurative biblical level events that happened throughout our throughout some of the company, and just seeing those as opportunities as opposed to what they feel like in the moment. But I worked at Miskelly Furniture in college, and I would work there mostly my junior and senior year. And very similar to the phone calls that Jackson and I got from our friends when we were opening the store. I was working on Saturdays because that's when the money's made in retail, and friends would be calling me. Somehow they'd be out on the lake having fun, and what are you doing? I'm trying to talk some lady into buying a sofa. That's what I'm doing, trying to pay the bills. So, but learning, and that was incredibly valuable for me to do it from I kind of did all the jobs there. Worked at the warehouse, was a mattress specialist, and then was a salesperson, and understanding some of the challenges from the salesperson perspective, and like taking some of those learnings into how we designed our process early on was really fun and interesting. But the other thing I would say is they are multi-brand. And so they had Ashley, but they had a lot of other brands. And really quickly, I realized how easy it was to sell an Ashley product because of the value. And it was just so apparent. And so, later on when we started really settling in on ideas and Ashley was going to start this retail concept, I had a lot of trust and confidence and faith in the brand because I'd seen it in action and what an incredible value. And here we are 20 something years later and they're still the best value in the market. It's just what an amazing company they are.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of great topics here. The Central Mississippi flooded in, the big one was 1979. So that would have been 1 year after they opened. And that, after a flood, you have a lot of great demand.
Yeah.
Everyone needs
a lot
furniture.
of insurance money.
Yeah. A lot of insurance money flowing in. So that helped. And then there was another one in 83.
Okay.
There was actually another one just a few years ago. They got to get the flooding under control with that Pearl River in Jackson, Central Mississippi. And then, so your uncles were running the business, Miskelly. Oscar, Tommy, and Chip were the primary folks running Miskelly Furniture, and you were doing everything. I remember when you were in sales, you used to tell the story that you decided it would be your time was money, and you wanted to see as many guests as possible. So one of the ways that you figured you could do that, and you're thinking about how to be efficient, you would pay someone maybe to finish the transaction for you so you could go back and work with the guests. Tell that story.
Yeah. So, I don't know if Oscar will watch this or not. So, I mean, I have to give him a lot of credit for trusting me to be out on the floor. And I would call him and say, Oscar, I think we can do this faster. Like it takes me forever to type in this whole order and I need to get back and sell more furniture. And he's like, just do the job, just go do the job. And so I did find someone to pay. So if I would make the sale, I had an assistant, for lack of a better term, who would key the sale, and I could get back in line and start working on another sales process. Yeah, and I mean, and I learned a lot there that I would talk about in our training. 15 years later, there's a guy named Robert Boykin, and he's like certainly one of the best salespeople I've ever seen, and not much to look at, not this incredible personality, but he was just a very strategically sound sales associate. And he wasn't very friendly. And he kind of, why are you always standing around? I was trying to learn like how he was selling so well. And finally he broke down and kind of told me some of his secrets. And one of his secrets was like, no matter what they ask, the question is not, the answer is not no. And so, if they say, hey, do you have a blue sofa? And you don't have a blue sofa. You don't say, no, we don't have a blue sofa. You say, we've got a green sofa. Yeah, he had all these little nuances of language and how important it was to interact and not introduce negativity into the interaction with the guest. So anyway, I really learned a lot, those days. And I had no concept at the time that any of this was going to translate into what I did with my career.
Yeah. And Dr. V was there when you were there, right?
Oh, yeah.
We've had him on the podcast.
Yeah.
And we've benefited from the friendship our two companies have had over the years. I remember early on, we went down to go study them and talk to Mark Waters, who's now back there as their, I think, VP of operations, and spend some time with them and ask him a litany of questions. But then Dr. V, I remember, and I like to introduce him as the man who taught me everything I know about selling mattresses next to you, but you learned a lot from Dr. V in selling mattresses, right? So riff on that for a second.
Yeah. Well, and I think, he brought it down to what the most essential point is, which is what's good for the guest. And I mean, mattresses are my favorite thing to sell because you're helping people sleep better. And so he just really distilled it down to what you're doing and how important that is and how it's truly a win-win. And how, what matters and what helping, make a mattress of higher quality and what's marketing and what's real. So he was great and just learned a lot from him and in all areas. He was a whiz on their systems and taught me a lot about that as well. So
I think decades later, his passion for selling mattresses and for the mattress and sleep business has only increased. He's not let up one iota, which is really special.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this, but so you never had the thought that one day you would open your own retail furniture store?
No, no, not at all. And I was doing it, because they were nice enough to let me do that, and I could make some money there and kind of have some spending money in college. And I was getting ready to go. I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, and just thought I would enter the kind of financial world, and certainly had no, and especially after working there and realizing how hard it is. I mean, this is a hard business. Certainly had no intention or desire to do that. That was not in my long-term plan. No.
So you're at the Godwin Group, you're applying for grad school, and then you just decide to go to Vanderbilt. How did that? Did you get accepted? Like, because it was a little bit late in the school year.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned it earlier. I was waitlisted at Vanderbilt. It was kind of my dream to go there, and I wanted to go there, and they gave me a deferral or a wait list or something and said I was too young and didn't have enough experience. And they were right, by the way, but I was determined. I really wanted to go. And so fast forward a couple weeks or maybe a month or so, and I just get an email with the orientation schedule on there. Like, here's when orientation starts, and here's where maybe the hotel you can stay at. And so I don't tell anybody, because I don't know if I'm in or not, if they've just accidentally sent me the orientation. I never got formally accepted. And I said, I'm just going to go up there and act like I'm in. And if I'm not, I'll never tell a soul. And so I go and, stay at the hotel, get coffee run into, somebody who's obviously we catch a bus to the campus, and you go in, and everybody's waiting in line at this table with your orientation packet. And so we get there, and there's all these people behind me, and they said, what's your name? And they're looking, handing me the bag. And I said, Jonathan Ishee. So she's looking, and it's taking longer than it's taking anybody else. And I am like, have my foot planted to just run away. I'm just going to get my car and go home and not tell anybody. Like, I obviously didn't get in. And as literally I'm about to just exit stage left. And she says, how do you spell that? And I said, oh, with an I. And she's like, oh, here you are, right here. And like, right then and there, I let out a little audible, like, yes. Like, and I'm sure everybody's like, why is he so excited about getting his orientation packet? Like, it's got a t-shirt in there, So, but that's how I found out I was accepted to Vanderbilt. So, it was a little bit of a spooky moment there, but it worked out.
I'm not even sure. I don't even know if you put in your 2 weeks notice, or if you still, I just remember it all happening quickly. I may have known that you were leaving, because I want to say, if not helping you move, I think I came up shortly after you moved.
Yeah. I think you helped me move in. But yeah, it was sudden, because I couldn't tell anybody. I didn't know if I'd gotten in or not. It's like, they give me the orientation plan a week before school starts.
Well, we were sad to see you leave Jackson, Mississippi, but we were super excited for you to take your undergrad degree from Mississippi College and parlay that into a graduate school degree at Vanderbilt University. That's awesome. So how did the idea of opening an Ashley Furniture HomeStore even come about?
Yeah, well, so I have to stop here and talk about Jackson for a minute. And so Jackson was Jackson Moore, co-founder of the business, was he and I were the same year at Vandy, and had just really developed a cool friendship. We both loved sports, loved SEC football. We loved playing intramural sports. Jackson had a little more athletic success than I did. He's an incredible athlete and played outside linebacker at SMU, and since we're in North Carolina, was like recruited by Mac Brown to play quarterback in North Carolina. So the guy was a great athlete, but he had just this competitive drive and desire, and that's attractive to me. And I like to think I'm competitive. And so we had fun playing sports together, and we would study together, and just struck up a real friendship, and had a lot of shared beliefs and shared faith. And so when it came time so we were there, and we were at school during 9/11, and most of the interviews were scheduled for after that September 9/11, and you would get your internship and then ultimately get your job. So most of the people that typically would do the internship interviews just shut it off. And so there was a little bit of a, what are we going to do moment for most of the people that were my year in graduate school. And so Jackson and I kind of said, hey, at some point I want to turn my key. And Jackson had that same desire and wanted to blaze his own trail. And so we looked at, there's no telling how many business plans we wrote. And at some point we'd kind of settled on, well, let's do, maybe we can do this commercial credit like company. As I say it, it's almost embarrassing how bad of an idea it was for us to try to do that. But one of the people, I said, well, let's talk to Ashley Furniture. They could be a customer of ours. And this is oversimplification, but Ashley basically said, that sounds like a terrible idea. We're opening retail stores. You guys should look at that. And my Uncle Chip and Oscar and Tommy and their relationship got us the meeting in the first place. And so, and then we started looking at that business and said, wow, this is something really cool. We could, and this was like, they had a store in Alaska. They had a store in Hawaii. They had a store in Hickory at the time. And maybe like, I mean, we were certainly, I don't think we were in the first 10, but we were in the first 20 locations that they had. So it was it was a new idea, and it was exciting, and it felt like something we could get our heads around. And so, there was no grand plan. We fell into it with, the help of the Miskellys and good timing.
Yeah, good timing. So your first year of grad school in September of that year is when 9/11 occurred. You go through the first year. That summer, I believe you worked for Viking in Greenwood, Mississippi. And your buddies are getting interviews with investment banks. And if I recall correctly, because you got into Vanderbilt MBA as a late admission with limited work experience, you're pretty young in your career. You'd been at the Godwin Group, and that would come back to haunt you, but help you because if I recall correctly, you weren't getting the same interviews because of a lack of like over multiple years of work experience in that sector. So you had to figure out what to do. And plus you wanted to turn your own key. You go back to Jackson, who also wanted to turn his own key. And that led you to looking through a litany of business ideas, getting a meeting with Ashley to pitch them on a commercial credit idea. And they said, no, we're opening stores. And just so happened there were maybe less than 20 stores open at that time. I think Wilmington, North Carolina may have also been another one.
Maybe so, yeah.
And interestingly enough, we're now in both of those markets, Hickory and Wilmington. And we have the original Wilmington store through that acquisition we acquired. So that's a really cool story. Well, I want to go back to Jackson for a second before we get into your second year of grad school. So you went back to Vanderbilt after the summer, and you and your Jackson are going through all these ideas. And you said you needed a business partner. Were you mulling through a couple of different people, or ultimately you did decide you wanted to partner with Jackson, but did you have a selection process for who you wanted to partner with, and especially someone who's going to be a 50-50 operational partner? Like what advice would you give in terms of selecting a business? You mentioned something about the competitiveness, the drive, the shared beliefs, the shared faith. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question. I mean, I wouldn't want to present this like there were people lining up to be my business partner. So that's not the case by any stretch of the imagination. But we had, as typical in that environment, I'd had a lot of discussions with different people around, hey, should we start this business? Should we go into business together? And so I think, in my mind, there was a decision process, and there were some people that I was thinking about. And ultimately, I think, and what you learn about business is like, there are a lot of similarities to how you select a wife or a spouse, a life partner. And in that, I mean, you have to know how people are going to react when times are bad, when times are tough. It's, can be really easy to get along and row in the same direction when times are good, but there just has to be this incredibly high level of trust. And we can give Jackson a hard time and laugh about some Jackson stories all we want, but he's eminently trustworthy and have never once questioned his integrity and honesty, and so I think without that, it's hard to build on anything. So that was the foundation. And then we look into, okay, well, we both have a shared faith. We both want to be competitive. We want to win. Like we want to understand what the rules of the game are. What are the metrics we're going for? Like, let's define success, and then let's figure out how to get there and go get there. And Jackson had different skill sets and different mentalities in a lot of ways, but ultimately we never questioned each other's desire to win or the integrity of the relationship there. So when you have those things, you can kind of deal with whatever comes at you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. And then Ashley, you're deciding, okay, let's go after this Ashley business, which is going to be, you're working on this your second year of law school. I mean, of grad school. So did you like leave school for a point and then decide to start the business, or how'd that work out?
Yeah. So, we did decide, okay, we're gonna do this, and we came to Charlotte, and they had kind of given us a soft yes on Charlotte as a market. Come to Charlotte and find a location, and the way the calendar laid out, we were going to have to be open. We were going to start spending money we didn't have before we were going to be out of school, and so it was a pretty easy decision. Like we've got to go build this business. Like, and we talked to the dean of the business school at the time. Was a great guy. Was very understanding and supportive. Vanderbilt has an emphasis on entrepreneurship, and so they understood, and they gave us a path to do some school work while we were opening the business related to what we were doing. The quality of our work probably wasn't up to par, but they worked with us, but ultimately, we had to move on. It was time to start this business, regardless of what other, what else is out there.
So you probably finished the first semester of your second year, and then you devoted full time.
Yeah. So they were on a mod system. Okay. So we moved here in February,
of 2003.
Yes.
And you started working on this probably July, August 2002.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's exactly right. Furniture market, 2002 would have been in Tupelo. It would have been our first meeting.
Okay.
With Todd.
Yeah. I don't even know when that would have been.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. The calendar's changed a lot. Yeah. So, yeah, that's right. So Jackson and I moved, like we got kind of permission from the school. And we were going to move a few days later, and there was this massive snowstorm coming in that looked like it was just going to lock us down. And so literally middle of the night, we decided, hey, we got to get out of here. We got to beat this snowstorm to get to Charlotte and get to work. And so it was, they were crazy times.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go into, so Ashley Furniture Industry stated that to be approved, there had to be sufficient capital to open the business and a level of net worth of credit worthiness. I need to pause at this moment. You're coming out of Vanderbilt with a lot of student loan debt. And instead of going to try to get the best income job you can to pay down your debt, it's a little bit of a risky proposition to say, you know what, I'm going to go start up a business, try to take on maybe more debt or whatever that I don't have, and maybe not even pay myself. I'll figure out this loan piece. I guess I can't repossess your degree. And so that, I think there's something to that, but you were coming out of MBA school, not technically even finishing, kind of somewhat finishing, at least getting the degree with a pile of graduate school debt, not nearly the personal net worth or credit worthiness that Ashley would have allowed, especially not this day and age, now that they're established. How did you and Jackson manage to circumvent or navigate that aspect? I think there's a cool story there.
Yeah. So, first of all, today with Ashley's, I guess, improved vetting process, we would not have gotten in the door. So again, timing's really important in all of this, but, Jackson's fortunate to come from a family with some means, and they were incredibly supportive all along the way, and were willing to do whatever it took. But if you're wanting to get me to admit to fraud on, recorded camera and microphone, I'm not going to do that. So we won't go into any of the details, but no, there were, we never said anything that wasn't true, back to the honesty and integrity. But, an example would be, I was 23 at the time. And Todd didn't know, Todd Wanick had no idea how old I was. And so it was kind of after the fact, a throwaway comment. He's like, "Are you even 30 years old?" And I just kind of let it hang, but yeah.
Plead the fifth.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned Charlotte. Ultimately, you and Jackson landed on Charlotte, North Carolina. There was no, other than Hickory, there were no licensees. Why Charlotte? What other areas did you consider? Where did you target where you wanted to open your first store?
I really wanted to stay in the South, and Jackson did as well. And I kind of have to give Jackson credit for, we looked at a lot of other markets, and ultimately he said, well, I mean, we're going to be moving somewhere. Why don't we move to the place that's growing the fastest, that's the largest market? So if Birmingham and Memphis and some of these other markets that were available at the time, his point of view was, why don't we go where the biggest opportunity is? And I kind of followed his lead on that. And that was prescient. That was a good idea.
That was a great idea.
Yeah.
Good on that one. Okay, that's all for episode 1 with the Jonathan Ishee series from Stories from the River. Check us out on YouTube or Apple or Spotify. And please come back for episode 2.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. Join us again next week, and remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.